Live today. We're talking about the differences between why men and women cheat. Obviously, there's a big divide. There's a big difference between the motivations behind each thing. So we've got our expert here, Jared.
Yeah.
I'm Chase with Magnetic Men Club.
Hey guys, Jared Schoonmaker. How you all doing? Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. We actually made a video about this earlier this week that you can actually go check out, where he covers a lot of these topics already. But we just really wanted to dive deeper into this and talk a little bit more about it. And so, in your experience, like, is there a clear divide between men and women? And when it comes to cheating, like, would you say that they have, like, why would you say that a man cheats versus why a woman cheats? And what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, man. So it's interesting. So to the first part, the divide, or how big of a difference is it? So I'm going to be looking down because I wrote some notes on this study I found.
Yeah.
There's a lot of studies out there, but I picked this one because it was the most up to date, considering what's been going on out there. So this is from the Institute of Family Studies, and they did two surveys. The first survey was between 2010 and 2016. And out of everybody they pooled, now in the study, I couldn't find how big their pool was, but let's just assume at base, this study is fairly accurate. And it showed out of everybody they pooled, 20% of men claimed that they have cheated versus 13% of women. Now that's about a 7% swing. So that
Right.
There's a huge divide there. I mean, it's, both men and women cheat. But here's where it's interesting. I went through that study and then they went by groups. So married people from 18 to 29, women actually reported that they cheated more in that group at 11% versus men at 10%. So it's interesting. We've done some videos on this particular topic where typically women between 18, 25, it could be up to 29. It's their party years. They're typically out there trying to date the Chads. They're really just out there. There's really, they're out there doing their thing. And so for them to get married that young, it does make sense that they would step out into that relationship because their sexual market value is so much higher at that age, from 18 to about 24. It peaks about 24. And when I say this isn't just me saying this. If you ask most women when they feel the most sexiest, 24 always comes up. They're like, I felt and I looked and I got the most attention right around 24. So what happens is 25, 26, it starts peaking down. Now, here's the other interesting part. Then the next group is married couples 30 to 39. Men now take the lead, where it's 14% of men and 11% of women. Right. So in this part, it makes sense because now men between that age group, typically 35, they start peaking, they start coming in to their best years. They make the most money typically at that time. They're a little bit aged. Women like that. They have more stories. They're more defined. They have more opportunity. So it makes sense that pool has taken back over by men.
Right.
And then let me just finish this because it's interesting, because as we get older, here's the next. The highest rates are men between 50 and 59 in this group. They had a 31% rate of cheating, or said they've stepped out in their relationship or marriage. Women between 40 and 49, their highest was at 18% in that group. So it's interesting, as we age, different paradigms that we are in our age groups kind of affect that level of the chances of you stepping out. So it's very interesting on this study. So to answer your question, as a whole, men do cheat more than women. But as technology, the internet, social media, all of this has come in, women have a lot more options, and that number is shrinking. women are starting to cheat just as much as men are.
Absolutely.
You know?
I think there's a lot of truth to it, honestly, because even without the statistics, I mean, it's a tale as old as time. Obviously, you know that men who get into their late 30s, get into their 40s, they're doing well for themselves. They have a lot of the direction in life. They've been there, they've done that, they're moving on, right? They're obviously more attractive to younger women. I mean, it happens that way. And so, I mean, even if you look at social media the last week, like everybody's totally just frantic about the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio is dating this 19-year-old model.
Yeah.
And I mean, regardless of your opinion, like there's statistics on this, though. It's a tale as old as time, like I said.
The only people that are frantic about it are the women in his age group that think, oh, you should be dating me. Okay. That's the only ones that are frantic. Guys are like, that's freaking awesome. If I could do that, I would do that. So, you know.
Oh, 100%. No, absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing. It's like I said, I mean, like, and it comes back to a lot of the topics that we've talked about too, like younger men in modern society, like they're obviously, a lot of them are dealing with the nice guy syndrome. And then you have women who are dealing with hypergamy at that age. And so a lot of it comes down to those topics that we've talked about before. And so
it all goes together. It all goes together.
And so that's why I like the series of these videos that we're doing right now. If you go back and watch our previous lives, like that's exactly what we talked about. And so this actually hits on those different things. Like that's really the core of it. And kind of, we've talked about strategies that you can implement inside of those videos too, to try and help you with it. But from your perspective, like how have the dynamics of modern relationships like impacted how people handle matters of infidelity, basically? Like we've talked about, like I said, hypergamy, we've talked about nice guy syndrome. How do you think that it's impacted, like just based on modern relationships?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but I just want to go back one time to this study because it is there is a difference between this. So in this study, they used the word infidelity, cheating, okay? And they used it based off an actual sexual act. Now, infidelity can be both married people or people in a committed relationship, and it includes physical and emotional. Okay, so they failed to say that in the study. So they were asking people, have you actually had sex? If they used also emotional, these numbers would skyrocket. These numbers would be like, oh, well, if you count that, I've been DMing this guy or I've been DMing this girl and I really have a connection to her, but I'm married or whatever. These numbers skyrocket on both sides. We're talking about physically, these numbers came out pure. They kind of said, have you had sexual relations with somebody else other than your partner? Right. And the other distinction on that, you got to remember, if it's at least one of those partners is married, it's not infidelity, it's adultery. So I want to make sure language matters. Language definitely matters. Absolutely. So that becomes adultery. So back to your question as far as what you asked in modern times. I'm sorry.
Modern relationships, basically. Like I said, dealing with the nice guy syndrome, dealing with hypergamy and different things like that. How do you think that this has affected modern relationships?
There's certainly more. You certainly have more access. Both parties, both sexes have access. You have, movies out there on the Hallmark Channel. You got all these kind of Disney things out there. You have videos out there kind of saying, not that it's okay, but it's more accepted. And so,
I
think we become desensitized to the fact that people cheat until it happens to you. Then it's very real. But as society, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I've cheated before. I've stepped out. I've done this. It's very desensitized until it happens to you. Then it becomes very real.
Right.
So I don't think, though, back, from our grandfathers or even probably our parents' time, the actual act of cheating and what it can do to a relationship has really changed that much. You do have new paradigms, polyamorous, you have all these different new styles, but that's really not cheating because it was an agreement made prior to. So you're really not cheating. There's an agreement. There's reciprocity there because both sides know what's to be expected. So,
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that there's a lot of truth to that too. Like I said, because I mean, access is a big thing. And so like when it comes to like meeting somebody else the old fashioned way, like whether you're going out to a club or whether you're going out to like, you know, a restaurant or something like that, you see somebody, even meeting somebody at a grocery store, just like I said, the old fashioned way. And then there's obviously internet, there's dating apps, there's all kinds of stuff going on these days that I think can really interject in these things. And so just based on that, I mean, what advice would you give to men and women to prevent them from getting too emotionally interested in someone outside of their relationship?
Yeah, that, you know, that's a it's a really good question, because number one, I think it falls first on the person. You know, you have to have your own certain moral compass. You have to have your own character, and first respect yourself. You got to respect your brand. We talk about this a lot on Magnetic Men. You know, this is a channel mostly for men. I have coached, I am coaching women, but we have a brand to protect. And so do we want to be viewed as, hey, that guy cheats on his wife, or he's a serial cheater? So you have to really take into account first, as the individual, this is my brand. This is my frame, as again, speaking as a man. These are the things that I expect in my relationship. If you can't respect this, then you're going to exit my life. And likewise, I will do my part and you do your part. So I think a lot of it has to do with, in the very beginning, is respecting yourself first. People ask me all the time this, but at its core, cheating is just very immature thing to do on all levels. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just an immature act on all levels.
Truth.
If you don't love your wife, or your wife doesn't love you anymore, instead of cheating, step out of the relationship first and then go through. But a lot of people want their cake and eat it too. And so again, not right or wrong, it just is what it is. And I hate saying that phrase, but it just is.
Right.
And it really depends on the lens through which you view yourself first, not your relationship, yourself. If you view yourself as a cheater, if you view, well, my dad did that, so that's just what I mean, there's a whole excuse and whole base underneath it. At the core, though, this is your brand. This is what you're representing to the world. How do you want to represent that? Do you want to be a cheater? Do you want to be whatever?
No, absolutely.
It's your choice.
That makes so much sense. Like I said, I mean, because you have companies out there, big corporations, personal brands, whatever it is, like people who are out there who are influencers, obviously they take their brand very seriously. It's something that I've done for at least the last 10 years. And so I understand branding really well. We understand like how to create a culture, bringing employees into that culture, and everybody has to buy into the culture. And if they don't, they have to get out. Yeah. And so it's like the same thing at your job. I mean, even if you go work for McDonald's, they're going to expect you to conform to their culture and their brand, because that's how they operate. And so it's the same thing for men. It's the same thing for women. Yeah. And at the end of the day, these corporations are really trying to model themselves after what would make somebody more human. They're trying to humanize themselves with these elements. And so if you can kind of take a look at that and realize that, you know, that's really important stuff. Like you really need to sit down and make your manifesto. You really need to sit down and decide like what is okay with you, what isn't okay with you, and really create your boundaries around that. And you test those boundaries with everybody, basically. If somebody tests the boundary, you got to push back. That's just what it is.
Right. That's exactly what it is. So, you know, in that context, you kind of said it. We just did a video. We haven't published it yet, but we did a kind of a play on words. Treat her like a worker, she'll treat you like a boss. And people are like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. I'm like, well, no. If you actually treat your love life or your relationships like a business, it sounds cold, but men typically don't do that. Treat it like business. Again, this is your brand. You're entering my frame. If you're a high enough value man, if you're on your path and purpose, if you're doing the things and you're ultimately a good man, she's coming into your frame. I mean, that's how it is in my relationships.
Right.
And so you have a responsibility to lead that. And you also have a responsibility to not let her stray outside the relationship. And that includes, you know, continually courting her, dating her, being there for her, being her mountain, being emotionally stable for her, continue to make money, do the things that she fell in love with you in the first place. If you can maintain that, well, you kind of limited that hypergamous nature to go out and cheat.
Absolutely.
So hypergamy definitely falls into this. It's a video we've done, but they do go together. They definitely do go together.
And so, yeah, that's one of the big things about this too, is basically, we've talked about this a lot. Like I said, the nice guy syndrome, the hypergamy, all that stuff, it all plays into this, because the biggest thing is you got to be really careful about who you allow in. You got to make sure everybody in follows your rules, your boundaries. You have to respect other people's boundaries too, obviously. I mean, we're not saying that like you're supposed to be this hardcore alpha male or anything. These are just traits of what makes a healthy relationship, like what makes a healthy person and keeps everybody around you happy and secure.
Right.
And so that's the biggest thing around it. So like, let's move into, what do you think the motivations are? Like, what are the motivations for men who experiment with infidelity? What are the motivations for women who experiment with infidelity?
Yeah, so a lot of it for men, the biggest difference for men now, again, when we talk about the infidelity, we're going to just use it as the act of physical sex, okay? Because there's an emotional, and men can be emotionally invested in other women. This is why OnlyFans exists. Men will escape into the room, little simps, and talk and bitch and whine to some girl at 5 or 10 or 20, whatever the hell it costs. So there is an emotional, they're not getting their sexual needs met typically through that channel, but we're talking about the actual art, the actual part of sex. So for men, it's not always emotional. It's mostly physical. Okay. We by and large, a man can step out of the relationship, have sex, and still love his wife.
Right.
By and large, in the same token, a woman cannot do that. Now, I'm not talking about every woman, because here we're going to hear some say, oh, I can, whatever. But by and large, a woman has to be emotionally invested in that guy, that new guy, in order for her to allow him to have sex of any kind. There has to be an emotional connection. So those are the two differences largely between those sexes. Men, we don't really have to even like the girl. We're just having sex. So that's the first one. There's also between both is opportunity. I use this as maybe you're on a business trip, you're a guy, a pretty girl comes in, or if you buy a score. I mean, there's opportunity. Women, same thing. If they're on a business trip, they might meet a guy at a bar, and it's opportunity. Right. So both of that is opportunity. The biggest one for men that a lot of people don't realize is stress. One of the biggest ways we get rid of stress is through sex. That's a huge release of our endorphins is through sex. So the higher the stress level of a man, if he's not getting sex from his girlfriend or wife, he's going to get it someplace else. There's just, he's going to do that. So that's the part for men. For women, it's a lot of it is up here. It's more emotional. There's lack of love in the relationship, lack of communication, kind of lack of that feel that partnership is gone. So once a woman emotionally checks out of this relationship, it's only a matter of time where she's going to monkey branch, wait for the next guy, monkey branch, and jump on with him. Because typically most women will not leave that relationship until somebody else comes along. They just don't. Most women just cannot be alone, So you have that. And then you also have revenge. Men don't typically cheat for revenge, but women will. When she finds out that her husband cheated, she might just go out and do the same thing, an eye for an eye, tit for tat. Right. That is a reason why they do it, to kind of get back at him. And then again, we talked about variety. Both men and women, if you're not keeping your sexual excitement going, trying new things, being adventurous, and they're always doing boring freaking missionary or something, women love sex just as much as men. Men don't let probably more probably more. And so if you're not keeping her, just sexually stimulated, and she always knows, oh, here he goes, he's going to do this and he's going to do that, and he always knows, it's variety. And the same goes, women, if you're watching this, for men. If you're always doing the same thing and you're not willing to try new things, he's going to get bored. Now, will he cheat? No, I'm just saying, as a whole, keep it alive, keep it new, keep it fresh. But those are the reasons why typically the differences between why somebody would cheat for a woman versus why a man's. It's always, most of the time, physical for men. It's emotional for women. And that's why it's so devastating when a woman cheats on her husband, or the woman cheats on her, boyfriend, LTR, whatever. It's much worse, because men inherently know she has to like him. She has to at least have some feeling to her, some emotional, where we're like, I didn't even know that girl in accounting or whoever the hell it is. It was actually, I don't even remember her name. Huge difference. Again, not right or wrong. Those are the differences.
That's just nature. Like, that's just the thing. Like, we're all prone to our nature. We all deal with this nature in different ways. And so I think that there's a lot of truth to that, honestly. I mean, even being a man, I think a lot of people could listen to that and be like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, internally, that seems about right. Yeah. And so I think that the statistics even back that up too. And so the biggest thing is keeping it interesting. Like you said, like, I think that that is a really important point. Like, you want to keep things as interesting as possible for as long as possible. And that's how you'll continually fall back in love. And that's how you'll continually make sure that neither one of you really wants to get outside of this relationship. And so that's the benefit of having a healthy relationship. When the man steps up the way that he needs to, when the woman is doing the things that she needs to do in the relationship, then things stay interesting. And when you're trying to keep things interesting and you're trying to adapt, you're trying to, like I said, when you go on vacations and things like that, don't just do the same old stuff. Don't just let it be the same old thing all the time. Try and spice it up, right? Yeah. You need to communicate. The biggest thing is communicate. Let him know what you want. Let him know what you want. Let her know what you want. Like, they can't read your mind. And so the biggest thing is, if you're not communicating with them that you want this particular thing, I mean, it's one thing when somebody won't do something with you, but it's another thing entirely when you didn't even tell them that that's what you wanted them to do. And so it's really important when it comes down to it, trying to keep it interesting. Because, like, you look at all these couples that have been in the relationship for 10, 20 years, and at that point, they have no choice but to adapt if they're going to stay together.
Yep. And even communicating on the uncomfortable lie, or the uncomfortable truth, versus like the flattering lie. So let's say you're married and your wife is comfortable enough to say, hey, there's this new guy at work, and I don't feel comfortable. Like, maybe he's attractive, or there's something there, for her to actually come to you and say, there's something, I like this guy. It sucks to hear, but I'd rather know about that, and let's figure out, what am I doing? And the same thing with the guy, having those conversations where you're open enough to say, look, maybe I'm a little weak right now because you really haven't been spending a lot of time with me. And then Charles comes in and, shit, like, I don't want to ruin what we have, but I need you to step up. And same thing with the girl. Like, hey, there's a new secretary at work, and babe, we haven't had sex in a while. Like, having those kinds of communication, that kind of talk, man, that can save a lot of problems. People might not want to hear about, talk about, but that can save a lot too.
So that kind of brings me to my next question too, like, because there's that phase of communication before anything has ever happened.
Yeah.
But then there's another phase of communication, I think, where, what if we suspect that it did happen? So I think there's two parts to that.
Yes.
So one part being like, okay, well, I suspect they're doing this. How do I confront them about that? The other part is, I've been doing this and it's weighing on my mind, and I want to talk to them about that. So what advice would you give? Like, what's a healthy way to approach the issue of infidelity of a relationship?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because if you are carrying this weight, this lie, and you need to get it out there, if you need to tell your partner, hey, remember that vacation or that work trip I went on? Yeah, okay, well, this happened. But again, It's about just getting it out there and then take your whooping. Whatever's going to happen, take it. You know, some, I don't know the statistics on this, but I would say by and large, most women, if you're honest and they didn't find out some other way, like they didn't find out through a friend or whatever, and you just said, hey, I slipped up, I did this thing, there's a better chance that she'll work with you, therapy, whatever, and work through it versus not saying anything and her finding it out, because then you just bruised her ego 2 times. You didn't tell her, somebody else gave her evidence. And so that's a double thing. And like same thing with the girl. If a girl does it to her husband or her LTR, don't embarrass them anymore. Tell them, and then take your ass whooping. Whatever happens, whether they want to work through it or they want to exit, you gotta, yeah. I mean, you might not want to lose your wife, but if you've been cheating on her for, the last year and you were then honest about it, you have no argument. You got no hands in this. You got no freaking argument. Like, okay, well, we're getting a divorce now. I get it. Okay. I mean, it is what it is. Yeah. So, but yeah, so you have that, you have part of it, but by and large is never like get to that. And again, this is the men's channel, is
exactly
being the leader, being that person, and being the leader of that relationship. Unless you married a straight up most way, you probably vetted them better than that. So they're probably not going to stray on you if you're doing all the things that you've done in the beginning, and it just gets better and better.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And that's the thing too, is once it's happened, then you have to ask yourself, like, I don't know, would you be better in a different relationship anyway? Yeah. And so that's the big thing too. Like, what are the motivations for it? Obviously, for men, it's different. For women, it's different. But at the same time, when we find it out, it's one thing if they told you. It's another thing if they found out from somebody else. Obviously, that's going to create a whole different situation depending on how that goes.
Well, then you're alive.
Like, I think that even at the end of the day, like even after we found out, like you have to understand, like if you sat somebody down and told them that you cheated on them, like you've just given them a big burden to carry. And now you've got to figure out how you're going to overcome that. If you're going to overcome that, what can happen next? And so obviously that's a big thing no matter what we decide to do. And at the end of the day, like you're probably going to need therapy. You're probably going to need coaching, something along those lines in order to be able to move through this and be able to let it go, because that's a big thing too, is like on both sides of this. Like if you've been cheated on, or if you're the cheater and you tell them and you guys decide that you want to move forward, like, I mean, you're a saint. your wife's a saint. Your husband's a saint. It is what it is. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like I said, you have to understand it's going to take them time to process that. It's going to take time to grieve and things like that too. Because I know that we have audience members who are going to be at varying levels of this. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that we have a piece of advice for everyone.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, on top of all that, so you brought up the fact that maybe you're a man right now going through a divorce because of this, or, maybe you cheated or she cheated and you're going through a divorce. But at the bottom line, the number one, so here's a couple other statistics I found pretty interesting. Obviously, 50% of all marriages fail. I mean, 50%. And the number one reason is infidelity. That's the number one reason. So you got to think about that. Say, okay, well, there's a lot of cheating going out there. But out of those marriages, out of that 50% that's going through the divorce, 70% of those are initiated by women, and 83% if they're college educated. So women are, by and large, you hear men break up households. It's just a flat lie. The numbers are there. Women typically will break up the household because of infidelity. There might be some other reasons, but because he cheated.
Right.
Basically what happens. So if you're in that situation and you're a man who's going through a divorce and you did cheat and you're looking for some support, to a degree we can help you. I would suggest, even though, we're coaches, you may need some therapy, because therapy takes somebody from who, again, we talked about this before, but it's important, who's dysfunctional to functional. You might have some issues going on that have led you to cheat that we can't necessarily help you on. Now, if you cheated and it was a mistake, or what happened, and it wasn't really a dysfunctional thing, and you're just looking to move on, maybe she cheated on you. Well, again, you yourself might not need therapy. You might need some coaching on kind of going through some of these limiting beliefs that you have, going through some of this trauma you have. We can talk about that. But by the end of the day, we have a strong group here that you can plug into. You have me and Chase, and there's probably 30 other coaches that we have access to, depending on what situation you're in, that can help you. And so the biggest thing is find a support group. Women have plenty of support groups going through this. Men have very few. And so we want to be able to provide men a group to listen to you non-judgmentally. If you did something, we're not here to judge. We're just here to help you navigate through your next steps and move on to your process so you can heal and find a new relationship and not make those mistakes again.
Absolutely. And that's the big thing too, is the support, because that's the one thing that most men do miss out on, is having that support. You have other guys here. Nobody's viewing you as weak. Nobody's judging you. There's really no point to that. That's not why we're here. That's not why we created this group. It really comes down to the fact that, men need support through this. If you read any books on masculinity, even if you've read Rich Cooper's book and all that stuff too, even with the No More Mr. Nice Guy, Robert Glover. Dr. Robert Glover, he talks about both of those guys, talked about how they were to a point where they wanted to kill themselves because they just didn't know what they needed to do next. Like their wife cheated on them, or maybe they cheated on her, and they really just didn't have the tools necessary. They're going through a bad divorce, a bad breakup. Maybe they're losing their business. A lot of that stuff happens to men because they really just don't have the advice that they need, and they just kind of let their life fall apart around them. And that's not at all what we want you to do. This is exactly why we're here. This is exactly why we set this group up, and this is exactly what we're trying to prevent. We want to make sure that men have the tools that they need to be who they want to be and to live in better relationships. And that's better for women. That's better for the kids. That's better for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. There's also a certain element to this prior to even cheating. If you're in a situation, maybe in your marriage, where you're just stuck, or you're feeling like there's got to be more to this, we offer coaching for that as well, because there just might be some gaps in what you used to do versus what you do. Obviously, you hear the phrase all the time, we just grew apart. Complete bullshit. We didn't grow apart. That's just a nice, cute little buzzword. You have different social circles, possibly, but you didn't grow apart. You kind of just stopped communicating. And so a lot of it is maybe getting some coaching on communication skills, maybe getting on different if you are that typical nice guy, and maybe growing a little bit of a backbone, maybe that's what she needs in the relationship, is you to step up more. So before it gets to that level, if you feel it's going to that level, or to the level of not even cheating, a divorce, this would be a good time to fill out the contact information we provide and get on a free recovery call, and at least get you on the correct path where you can start your own self-reflection and start your own journey to figuring this out, Exactly. Like I said, that's exactly what we're here for. We're here to support. We're here to give you the tools that you need to move forward. We're here to help you get what you want out of your relationship, out of life, out of everything that you need. Like we said, we've got a whole network of coaches who can help you with your business, who can help you with your marketing, who can help you with your relationship, whatever it is you're trying to do. That's what we're here for. And so just like Jared said, go to our website, magneticmenclub.com, and schedule that free consultation if you feel like you need some help. Definitely.
But that's all we have for you today, guys.
Yeah, man.
We really appreciate you guys.
I appreciate it. I like this new time we're doing. A lot of people kind of asking, hey, what happened Wednesday? I said, well, we're just going to beta test Thursday and see how well that does. So, but we'll do it at least once a week. We're going to test Thursday for a bit and kind of go from there. But thanks, guys, for plugging in, listening to us, and got any comments, drop them down below.
All right, yeah. We'll see you guys next week. Show up with your questions. Make sure you watch our videos. And if you have any questions on those videos, we're happy to answer them on the call live here.
Definitely. Thank you.
See you, Jared.
We'll see you later. Bye.